And welcome everybody to the Animation Podcast, a weekly podcast about all things animation, brought to you by FilmBook. My name is Matt Brunet, but some of you may know me as Animat from my YouTube channel, Electric Dragon 505, home of web series that are all about animation, including Animation Look Back and Animat's Reviews. If this is your first time here in the Animation Podcast, let me tell you everything about the Animation Podcast. Because you see, in the Animation Podcast, it is a podcast I talk about animation. I know, it's a very complex theory, and there are a bunch of scientists that are trying to confirm that, but it's still under wraps. We're still unsure if the Animation Podcast is actually a podcast about animation. But specifically, however, the one conclusion we could find about it is that it talks about the news that happened this week. So, starting off with this week, we will be looking into a brand new box office record has been set this year once again, but not necessarily in a good way. Then we will be discussing about the full trailer of Moana. Then afterwards, we will be looking at one of the major downsides about Comcast buying DreamWorks Animation. Then afterwards, we will be looking into the new Pokémon Sun and Moon anime, where Ash is going into a brand new direction. And finally, we got Matt's Pick of the Week. If you want to check out more episodes of the Animation Podcast, then head on down to FilmBook, that is film-book.com, by searching the Animation Podcast. You can also email us at podcast@filmbook.com with the Animation Podcast in the subject line. So, to start things off, recently we got a brand new animated feature out this week, which is The Wildlife. And you guys might be surprised to hear this, but The Wildlife actually set a brand new record at the box office. Now, some of you might be wondering or just thinking that must be impossible. There's no way. I mean, we've already got a year or at least a summer full of brand new box office records graciously provided us with Finding Dory and The Secret Life of Pets. They set up brand new box office records for animation that would make 2016 a pretty good landmark in terms of how animated films are doing financially. So why do we have to mention The Wildlife into this? Why do we have to bring that movie here? Well, when I mention that The Wildlife broke a new box office record, I don't necessarily mean that in a good way. Because on the opening weekend, when The Wildlife was released, it made a total of only $3.34 million. That is not in one day. That's pretty much the whole weekend, only making $3.3 million. And it really is pathetic. So, with that in mind, I really wanted to check if that is actually a brand new record. Not necessarily. Now, by hearing this, you might expect that, oh, is it the worst, is it pretty much the worst opening for an animated feature film ever? Not necessarily, but it actually is the worst opening for an animated feature film of the decade. So, at least among the 2010s, yes, it is the worst opening ever. But I will say this, among the worst ever, The Wildlife actually is among the top 5. If you guys don't know, don't know the list, allow me to explain a little bit for you about what it is. So at number 5, we got the Powerpuff Girls movie, making about only almost 3.6 million. Then afterwards, at number 4, we got The Wildlife, which ended up getting 3.3. So The Wildlife is the 4th worst opening ever for an animated feature film. Afterwards, let me just check over here. I'm using Box Office Mojo, by the way, just to clear that out there. Looking into here, I'm trying to find... Oh, here it is. Going higher on the list, at number 3, we got Teacher's Pet, which started out with almost $2.5 million on its opening weekend. Then afterwards, on number 2, coincidentally enough, we got a sequel with All Dogs Go to Heaven 2 that made $2.25 million on its opening weekend. And number 1, the worst ever opening for an animated feature, is actually the 2008 film Delgo, which started out with only $511,000, or actually $512,000 on its opening weekend. And if you want to know in terms of overall, for The Wildlife, it's actually the 44th worst ever openings for like the worst ever openings for a feature film. Like that is overall. So it is indeed in the top 50. But for Delgo, starting off at $512,000, it is actually up at number 2. The only one that actually was able to defeat it was the Oogie Loves in The Big Balloon Adventure, which started off on its opening weekend with $444,000. And by the way, this is not among all the movies ever. This is among the ones that got a wide release, that actually was released in more than 2,000 theaters. So The Wildlife is definitely one of them. So in terms of those films, like animated feature films that got a wide release, it is the 4th worst opening ever. And this is actually very interesting. Now, it does actually bring up the question, with such a low box office number, some might wonder, is like, how did it fail so miserably to bring in people in theaters? Is it mostly because of competition? Because it was actually released at the same time as movies as Tom Hanks' Sully and also When the Bow Breaks. But with The Wildlife, why is it that people aren't flocking into it as much as the other animated feature films? Because if anything, if 2016 proved anything, is that animated films are such a big appeal. Like, they bring in audiences so easily with movies such as The Secret Life of Pets, Zootopia, Finding Dory. Like, they bring in people to theaters as much as superhero films. Well, it's not necessarily because of the competition, nor is it really because of marketing, because let's face it, the marketing in this film is actually really, really poor, down to the point that I really had a difficult time trying to find like various clips and trailers, just to find like different clips in order to use it in my review, but it was just so limited. I ended up just stalking pictures at the same time. It really was that bad. So you can even tell that even the marketers don't even give two craps about The Wildlife. But why is it that The Wildlife failed? Well, let me tell you why. And I think the best way to put it is it's through Charles Solomon's review of The Wildlife. Now, just to give you guys a little bit of a context, if you guys don't know Charles Solomon, he is a very prominent and well-respected figure in the animation community. He is both a very grand historian and also a very fantastic film critic. While at the same time, he is also a wonderful author. I actually have one of his books. He was actually the author of The Art of Frozen. Fantastic book. Definitely enjoyed it. But yeah, going into here, Charles Solomon, someone whom I highly respect, he actually posted a review of The Wildlife on the website The Animation Scoop. And my God, let me tell you, in my review of The Wildlife, yeah, I was pretty harsh at it. I gave it like a 3 out of 10. It was a pretty bad movie. But Charles Solomon here, he was merciless. He was brutal. Like, holy crap. He is so brutal to this film, down to the point he actually deemed it the worst animated film of the year. And yes, he was actually aware about the other pieces of crap that we got, like Ratchet and Clank or Ice Age 5, or even Norm of the North. He would place this as the worst more than Norm of the North. And the things he said about it, oh my God. Each one is a massive strike. Okay, let me just give you 2 great examples of how he was brutal to this movie and these characters in particular. Okay, let me just go and start off here. This little excerpt, like, this is the first one. I need to read it to you. Okay, the film is narrated by the macaw, voiced by David Howard Thornton, whom Crusoe dubs Tuesday, the worst motorbeak since Alex in Walking with Dinosaurs. And just through that, I was like, oh, God, oh, that hurts. Man, that really hurts. Oh, God. And he actually did this again. He actually did another one where I read it. It's just another really nasty comparison. Okay, I'm trying to find the other one. Where is it? Where the fridge is it? Okay. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. There's another one. Like, so he just made a comparison to Mac with Alex from Walking with Dinosaurs. But here's another painful one. Is actually with Robinson Crusoe. Now, in the film, Robinson Crusoe is that he's just like the one-dimensional bumbling idiot. That's it. But apparently here, Charles decided to take it a step further. He says, the generic-looking Crusoe could be the long-lost brother of Flint Lockwood in the Meatballs films, and the animation of the character is formulaic and unconvincing. And even I was just like, oh Lord, oh, the brutality is real. The brutality is so real in this review. I swear to God. I mean, this is the kind of brutality that you expect this random guy to pop out of nowhere going, Toasty! Oh my God. Two of the worst animated characters that you could be compared to. Oh my God, that is nasty. But yeah, this is just a little example of how Charles Solomon's review of The Wildlife is just brutal. And I highly recommend, by the way, you guys should go and read this. Go to animationscoop.com and read Charles Solomon's review of The Wildlife. It is absolutely worth it. Now, going back to the point that I wanted to make, I don't necessarily agree with what Charles Solomon said, that The Wildlife is the worst animated feature film ever. Well, not ever, but I mean like the worst animated film of the year, because we got Norm of the North, and there's no way that you can beat Norm of the North as the worst one this year. It's just, there's no way. But there is one thing I will agree with him on, is his reason why he said that The Wildlife is the worst animated film of the year. And this also goes into why nobody cares about The Wildlife. Nobody went to go see it. And, yeah, probably, it's right over here. Okay. Perhaps the most damning thing about Wildlife is that it's so feeble, it can't even annoy the hapless viewer. It just feels unnecessary. And that's probably the biggest thing about The Wildlife, is that this movie is just entirely unnecessary. I mean, we can all agree that the quality that this movie brought to us, it was very... It feels more like the kind of quality you would expect from a direct-to-DVD or a direct-to-Netflix animated film, more so than something that would be worthy enough to be put into to go and be put in theaters worldwide. But coincidentally, this is coming from Lionsgate, and they actually did the same thing with Norm of the North. And if there is any company out there that actually does seem even more clueless about animation, even more than Sony or even the Weinstein Company, it's so far the Lionsgate, because they're just distributing films without freaking reason, and there's just absolutely no point or no explanation to why they would bring out movies like Norm of the North or The Wildlife into theaters. But here's the thing about The Wildlife, and like what Charles Solomon probably means about it being unnecessary, it's that, here's a bit of my theory. The reason why The Wildlife is unnecessary is that there is nothing good that you could say about this movie, like, ever. The Wildlife is just, it's not that good, period. So there's nothing good to be said about The Wildlife. However, there's nothing as well that can be said that is really bad about The Wildlife. There's nothing that is memorably bad. Like, you're going to think back about this movie and you'll remember about some aspects that would make you cringe or you just absolutely hate about it. Because when you look back at many of the really bad animated films that we got this year, there are some elements that you will remember about it that is actually terrible. Ratchet and Clank. Looking into that film, what is actually really horrible about it is that the writing is purely garbage. It is poorly set up. It was terribly adapted from the games into this one movie. In fact, the writing is actually so bad that one of the writers actually had to go and pin the blame on the others so that he can pretty much get away with whatever, with what a terrible job he has done in order to save his career. It was really that bad. On top of that, there was also Quark, a despicably hateable and terrible character. Like, this guy is just so stupid and so full of himself, he just makes me cringe. In fact, like, the movie somehow actually takes a good chunk of the film and make him the main character more than Ratchet. After he does become, like, the Galactic Warrior or something, he becomes this absolutely bland character. So that's what makes Ratchet and Clank memorably bad. And then you got Ice Age 5, Ice Age Collision Course. People will remember how bad that movie is because it's the 5th Ice Age film. There shouldn't be another Ice Age film. They should have stopped after Dawn of the Dinosaurs. Blue Sky should have moved on to make other films other than continuing the Ice Age franchise. But lo and behold, we're up to the point that now there are 5 Ice Age films, and you can absolutely tell that they are running out of ideas. Why? Because they decided to go and give Sid a girlfriend, demanded by absolutely no one. It's just absolutely ridiculous, and the movie has become so juvenile that the jokes are just god awful, and that is why we're going to remember Ice Age 5 being a terrible movie, because it should not exist, yet it is there, and you could tell that they're just forcing it out instead of actually making a movie. Norm of the North, on the other hand, I don't need to tell you about what is wrong with it because we're going to be here for like a freaking hour, and the movie itself is nothing but an entire grocery list of why that film is just so terrible. But then you have The Wildlife. Now, what is wrong with The Wildlife? Like, what is it that is so memorably bad about The Wildlife is that it's just 90 minutes of boring. That's all it is. Because, yeah, it's a bad movie, but it's not memorably bad. The elements that they have here, they play it so safe. They play it so tame. Like, they don't go off the wall, or, like, they suggest any stupid ideas that, it's not memorable enough to remember what would happen. It reminds me a bit, I've never seen a movie like this since Alpha and Omega, where there is absolutely nothing good to be said about it, but yet there's nothing terrible to be said about it as well. That's why it's just absolutely forgettable. I remember when I left the theater after watching that film, somehow, it just dawned on me. It was like, why am I here? Oh yeah, I saw that movie. That was pretty much it. And the same thing happened with The Wildlife. I remember when I was writing my review, I really had a hard time trying to think of what basically happened in The Wildlife. Because there's nothing memorable. There's nothing likable. And even the characters, they're just so bland. There's no personality in them whatsoever. It's just a really dull film. And that's why it doesn't have as much attention, or I guess you could say appeal, as much as the terrible movies like Norm of the North. It's just, there isn't anything that's really bad about it, and that's why people are just going to go and forget it altogether. In fact, it's going to be amazing if it manages to stay in theaters for another 2 or 3 weeks. The thing is with The Wildlife is that there's nothing that is appealing whatsoever, good or bad. And that is pretty much the reason why nobody went to see it in theaters. Because it's just a piece of crap that just belongs in those straight-to-DVD films. That's it. In fact, this is like a Belgian-France animated film. Like most of those movies anyways, they would get released on direct-to-DVD. So I don't really see why there has to be a point to bring this into theaters other than, hopefully to bring in some money. It's just, there's no excuse for this. There really isn't. And overall, I guess the biggest thing is that Charles Solomon said it best, that The Wildlife is just unnecessary. And I think that's the biggest thing that we could take from this, is that this is just an unnecessary film. There's no reason for its existence. It offers nothing good to us, yet it offers nothing really bad to us. Now let's forget a moment about The Wildlife and let's move on to something that hopefully will be a lot better than that film. Something that is actually highly anticipated. In fact, I have stated several times before that this is one of my most anticipated animated films of the year, and I am of course talking about Disney's Moana. For the longest time, I was really excited about this film. This is Disney going back to their classic fairy tale roots, kind of the classic Disney formula in a way, something that they haven't done since Frozen 3 years ago. And on top of that, this is the directorial return of John Musker and Ron Clements, the legendary Disney duo that brought us movies such as The Great Mouse Detective, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Treasure Planet, Hercules, and The Princess and the Frog. And now they are back with their first ever computer animated feature film with Moana. And previously we have received some trailers before, but they're just small teaser trailers. Like, we got the first one where we just see Maui doing a dance, and then we got another one during the Olympics where we see a little bit more about what this could offer to us. But now Disney has officially released the first full trailer of Moana, and it actually does give us a little bit of an idea of what this movie could be about. And from what I'm seeing, it's actually going to be really interesting. And even with the reactions that I'm seeing from everybody, that one is actually quite interesting, because the thing is that I think we can all agree that in terms of Moana, it might not be as good as Zootopia. Like, we're not going to see that level of amazingness, or I don't know, maybe the trailers are deceiving us with it, but I don't know, chances are we're not going to see Moana among, like, the #1 best animated feature of the year as much as something like Zootopia. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But going into the trailer that I saw, honestly, I'm actually more positive with it. I think it might actually turn out to be something that could be pretty enjoyable. Like, regardless of how great it's going to be, or how amazing, or how okay, or how bad it's going to be, regardless of that, I'm pretty sure that we're going to get something that is actually enjoyable. Like, if we're going to see this in theaters, we're going to have a good time. Maybe not as much as a movie like Zootopia or Kubo and the Two Strings, but this could actually be something good. Some of the positives that I will say about it is that you can tell that this is going to be a movie that's going to be about the relationship between Moana and Maui. So we're pretty much going to see this connection together, how they have to go and work together in order to go and make, pretty much in order to go and save the city from monsters and like all this Polynesian legends and stuff like that. So basically, it looks like these two could actually have some good chemistry. Another element, I don't think anybody is going to deny this, but the animation looks absolutely freaking gorgeous. So if anything, if we're going to take anything from Moana, is that at least it's going to be so visually pleasing. That I can guarantee. It looks a lot of fun. The fantasy elements with what I already stated before with the Polynesian legends, like we already got like the lava being, and apparently one thing that actually deceived me is that I remember in the Japanese trailer when you see baby Moana, I always thought the wave was actually Maui, but no, it actually turns out that the ocean itself is actually a separate character. Like, that ocean is going to be Moana's friend since the very beginning of her life. It's going to be a bit different than Maui. With that said, anything else that I could say? Well, at least maybe the characters individually as well. They're actually pretty good. Moana especially. She looks like she's going to be the main star of this entire movie. She's going to be the standout character, like another representation of a strong woman, like a strong Disney princess probably. But no, definitely from the trailers that I see, she definitely feels like an enjoyable and a likable, strong character. So that I'm excited to check out. But then also at the same time, you might have some things that are not as pleasing as you'd probably expect. Like, probably some elements that could disappoint some people, thinking that this is going to be like the best thing ever, but it might not. Well, number one is the goofy tone. The goofy tone, like, you got Maui being the comic relief. I don't know, that feels like it could be hit and miss. I like, in this trailer, I did get the same reaction that I got when we actually see Maui doing that dance the first time that we got the teaser trailer. So I don't know, like, he feels like he could be just a goofy comedic sidekick who has all these amazing powers, and like, he kind of has that same egotistical flair as Daffy Duck or Cusco in The Emperor's New Groove. That, and also, I think the one thing that really tipped me, like, the one thing that I feel like, yeah, this could get a little too goofy, is honestly when we go into the field of coconuts. Like, once we get into that coconut world, that I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's a little too goofy. That's the part where I feel like this movie could be jumping the shark a bit. Like, where they have to meet up with a bunch of native coconuts that are actually an enemy. I don't know, that part I just feel like it's kind of dumb. But at the same time, for sure, we did not get everything in this. Like, for one, it's the music. Keep in mind, we are getting some songs in which one of the people writing the music is Lin-Manuel Miranda, the same guy that brought us Hamilton. You know, it's kind of the same thing like what happened with Frozen. You know, we didn't know the songs until the movie was released, and that became like a godforsaken phenomenon. So the thing is that with this trailer, I am convinced we didn't get everything that is about Moana. There's still a lot more surprises to come, especially with the songs. We don't know how it's going to be. I'm still keeping my hopes up that this is going to be a great film to watch. Yeah, maybe it's not going to be as great as something like Zootopia or, like either as good as either Zootopia or Kubo and the Two Strings, but I am pretty convinced this is still going to be good regardless. At least this is going to be a step up than any of the bad ones. This is not going to be like another Norm of the North or Ratchet and Clank or what else was there? Ice Age Collision Course, or even The Wildlife. It's definitely going to be a lot better, and at the very least, I can imagine this being one of the better animated films this year. But we'll just have to wait and see if Moana can actually exceed everybody's expectations with it when the movie will be released this American Thanksgiving. Okay, so for our next story, we're going back into the story about DreamWorks Animation and how they got purchased by Comcast and NBC Universal. So, coming soon in the near future, DreamWorks Animation is going to be a part of the Universal umbrella along with their films. And we have heard a lot of the stories that come with it. We know some of the movies that they want to make, including Shrek 5 and Edgar Wright's Shadows. We've also heard about the new management that's going to be happening, where it's going to be a little bit of a mix with the people at NBC Universal and also DreamWorks Animation. So this is going to be a combining works of the two, and we have heard about the departure of Jeffrey Katzenberg being the mighty king of DreamWorks Animation. Pretty sad, and honestly, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I might actually miss Jeffrey Katzenberg. But with all that said, they have done several steps to start forming this new DreamWorks Animation. However, there is another step that they took, which might not be looked upon well as a good thing. Now, the thing is that now that they have purchased DreamWorks Animation and they put up new leaders, another step is going to be about the employees, the people working at DreamWorks Animation. So, what do? Fire 200 people. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing, is that 200 people actually ended up getting fired, and they actually received a letter coming from one of the higher ends at the chairman of Universal Film Entertainment Group, Jeff Shell. They actually received this about 200 people received this letter by saying, Dear colleagues, as we move along in the process of integrating our companies, the leadership team will continually evaluate the needs of our business to ensure we are best positioned to meet our goal of being a leader in premium animation content across all platforms. As indicated on day one, we remain committed to transparency, and over the next few months, we will communicate about any changes expected as part of the integration with NBC Universal. To that end, today we have become sharing organizational decisions that will result in the elimination of approximately 200 positions at our Glendale campus. These changes are focused in the corporate overhead groups as well as distribution and consumer products, areas where we can fully integrate our operations with NBC Universal. Those who will be impacted by these decisions will be notified this week, and many will be working with us over the next several months as part of the transition. These are difficult but necessary moves as we work to integrate our organization, and we will be as generous as possible to those who will be leaving the company. We know you will join us in supporting your colleagues during this time of transition, and we too will be exploring our other opportunities for them and providing career placement counseling to help minimize the impact. Looking forward, we are excited about the incredible opportunities ahead for our combined organization, and we will work together to make them a reality. Thanks for your continued hard work, Jeff Shell. So with all that said, I gotta say that I do understand a bit about this process. I know that, I understand why that they gotta go and fire some people, because since that they are bringing in NBC Universal, there's not much of a need for a lot of these people to work at DreamWorks Animation, because keep in mind, DreamWorks Animation before Comcast, they were fully independent. They just need a giant corporation like Paramount or Fox to go and distribute their films. The rest, they handle it by themselves. However, with that said, it is still a pretty bad thing to happen that around 200 people would end up getting fired by DreamWorks Animation. And for me, I feel like it's kind of a bad decision. It's not necessarily a good idea to go and fire people immediately, because the thing is, DreamWorks, probably almost 2 years ago, they took a giant hit. If you guys remember back in the beginning of 2015, the biggest hit that DreamWorks Animation has ever received is that due to the failure of films such as Mr. Peabody and Sherman and The Penguins of Madagascar, they lost over 500 employees, and they had to shut down their Redwood division. And with that said, considering that now they got to take off 200 more employees, so in a span of approximately 2 years, they lost about 700 people. And honestly, in that regard, that is really painful. And honestly, with the business, for me, I feel like with the business people, the people taking care of, like it said here, the consumer products or the business side of it, the marketers, that I completely understand, because Universal already has that said and done. They don't really need any more. But if it's also going to impact the creative division, that is where it's going to be pretty nasty and pretty painful, because the thing is, at the same time, is that they are with DreamWorks, they are looking overseas for their animation division. They already opened an animation studio in China, where they actually made a Chinese version of Kung Fu Panda 3, and they also have an Indian division. And the reason why they opened shop there is because it's a lot more cheaper to hire animators there than it is in the US, especially with the whole union laws and stuff like that. So it is pretty it's pretty dangerous, and it is it's pretty bad, I must say. A part of me does feel hurt that 200 people at DreamWorks Animation had to be fired for this. it is kind of necessary, but I feel like it's a bit much. You don't have to go and fire that much people, especially at DreamWorks Animation when they've already received a huge blow. So hopefully this change could be for the best, that that Universal will be taking care of DreamWorks and they'll still operate DreamWorks Animation still as the animation studio that we all know and love, like even as back in the days with Jeffrey Katzenberg. But I don't know. This does, like, I understand, but it still worries me at the same time if DreamWorks would still be the same again. And I mean, like in that regard, it also worries me. What if this, this new acquisition doesn't necessarily work? What happens if these movies are going to continue to flop? Because keep in mind, the next movie that they got is going to be Trolls. And chances are, regardless of what you think about Moana with the new trailer, I'm sure that a lot of people are more positive towards Moana than they are with Trolls. That they would go and watch Moana instead of going to see the Trolls movie. I don't know. Like, there could be a chance that the next movies could end up being a flop. In fact, I know a lot of people who don't even care about whatever they're going to release. Like, not a lot of people care much about Trolls or The Boss Baby, maybe Captain Underpants or like Croods 2, Larrikins, or any of those movies. The only one that really is anticipated in their lineup is How to Train Your Dragon 3. And that's pretty much it. And like I said before, the ones that are in maybe is Captain Underpants and probably Edgar Wright's Shadows, because Edgar Wright is involved. But yeah, overall, like I said, I understand the process, but then again, it does worry me if this is going to hurt DreamWorks Animation, then it will help them. Like, I've stated this in the very beginning, that my biggest fear with this acquisition is that Comcast and NBC Universal are just going to use DreamWorks Animation just for their properties than actually an animation studio in itself. But we'll just wait and see, and let's just hope for the best for those 200 employees to go and find a new job elsewhere. Okay, so going back into more lighter news now, we are going to be looking into Pokémon Sun and Moon. Now, I know recently I have discussed a lot about video games instead of talking about actual animation, rather it be with Pokemon Go or even with Super Mario Run, but I swear to you guys, this is actually a legitimate news about animation. This is actually regarding the Pokemon anime than it actually is about any of the games or stuff like that. But going back into it, the Pokemon Company has announced the brand new anime that's going to tie in with Pokemon Sun and Moon. And once again, yes, it will star Ash Ketchum and Pikachu. However, they are going to take it into a brand new direction. Now, the thing is, with Pokemon Sun and Moon, what they want to do is that they are going to take Ash and they're putting him in school. Yes, after almost 20 years of this anime, Ash is finally going to get himself a frickin' education. At long last. But on top of that, we also received a brand new design on Ash and some of the other members of some of the other Pokemon members as well. And on top of that, they even put up a new advertisement, and it even says, Ash is going to school! It's the start of student's life that hasn't existed until now. Is he aiming for graduation? Well, I don't know, maybe he is, but then again, he's not freaking growing up. He still looks like a godforsaken 10-year-old, so maybe in that regard, he's not gonna freaking graduate. But at the same time, with this new direction that they are bringing, of course there's going to be a lot of brand new characters, many of which actually do tie in with the game itself, including Professor Oak's cousin, which is the Alolan form of Professor Oak. But surprisingly enough, you're not going to find any more familiar characters outside of Ash Ketchum and Pikachu. There isn't any signs of characters like Brock or any of the recurring ones like Misty, or even of some of the newer ones. It's been a while since I've seen the anime of Pokemon, but from what I can tell, from what I've seen, in the new anime, like in the one that's with X and Y, I saw that Ash is teaming up with the electric-type gym leader in Kalos, and at the same time, there's a new girl there. I think it's like the girl trainer, and at the same time, there is also the little girl that's kind of like a side character in Pokemon X and Y. But with that said, none of those characters are appearing, but surprisingly enough, from what I'm seeing, whether it be like the new poster that they revealed or even the little promotional video that they got, like where you got the guy freaking out like "Gonnato, gonna see anime, oh, Hashi's going to school," something like that. We don't see Team Rocket actually. They're actually absent, and the villains could just be Team Skull. So the plot could actually stay a lot more focused onto the plot of the game. But yeah, this is actually quite interesting, I must say, because the thing is that, like, I understand taking Ash into a brand new direction, but going to school, honestly, I feel like, yeah, it's a little late for that, because like, if they did it early on, then it would be understandable, because the people growing up with it, like, could actually relate with Ash. But now Ash is gonna go to school. And on top of that, like, technically, yes, this is not the first time ever that Ash is going to school. There are a few episodes in which I remember Ash actually is in a school. And probably one of the more famous ones is, I don't remember the episode in particular, but I remember, like, Ash, Brock, and Misty are in school along with Team Rocket in disguise, and the professor is there saying, "Alright, can you identify this Pokemon?" And all it is just a black circle. And we see all the suggestions is that, oh, okay, it's a Voltorb. Oh, it's an Electrode. Oh, it's a Pokeball. And then the teacher was like, "And the answer is Jigglypuff, seen from above." Yeah, well, screw you, you moron. But yeah, that's basically the thing. We've seen episodes in which Ash goes to school. But this one, the premise is where Ash is actually in school. So we're actually going to see Ash and some classmates along with a teacher that's going to be his new partners. So it's going to be with all of that. And on top of that, from the poster that I am seeing, next to Ash, which, by the way, he is doing that special little pose that, like, when you do it in the game, it actually does this special move that you could teach to your Pokemon. Like, Snorlax has that, like, the body slam. It's like some, like, pulverizing pancake or something. And even Pikachu has a new move. Like, Pikachu is even doing the pose as well. But next to him, he actually has a Rowlet, and he has that new Rotom Pokedex, which I still don't really understand. What the fridge is that? Is the point of that thing? But I don't know. We're just gonna wait and see for that. But yeah, overall, with all this is pretty much the new direction that Ash is going to school with Pokemon Sun and Moon. Is it going to convince me to go and watch Pokemon again in the anime? Not necessarily, and it doesn't look like it's going to appeal to a lot of people as well. If anything, a lot of people seem to be more interested in this new mini series or full series. I don't know what it is. It's like Pokemon Generations, where we actually see the detective from the games who goes out and investigate the crimes of many of the villains from all the Pokemon games, whether it be Giovanni from the first one or the Team Flare guy from Pokemon X and Y. So that one actually does look a lot more interesting. But yeah, if you guys are pretty interested to go see Ash Ketchum going to school, well, you gotta wait probably until 2017 or 2018, maybe, when it's going to reach in America, to go see Pokemon Sun and Moon, where Ash goes to school. And so finally, we got Matt's Pick of the Week. Now, for Matt's Pick of the Week this week, I decided to look back into an old story that I've covered. Actually, it was last week that I covered this story, and it was actually the top story. And I am talking about how Dax Shepard is going to be co-directing the Scooby-Doo movie next to Tony Cervone. Now, I've already discussed it, I've already said my piece regarding it, but then, out of the blue, came crazy old Amity of Cartoon Brew. And he actually shared this story as well, talking about Dax Shepard going to be the director of Scooby-Doo and all that stuff. But he is absolutely not pleased about it. And it's not because he is a hater of Dax Shepard. He doesn't really have anything against Dax Shepard. His biggest problem with it is that he is not a fan of the choice of bringing in someone who doesn't have a background of animation to go and direct an animated feature film. Taking an excerpt here from Cartoon Brew, it's stated here, this is in contrast to beforehand, he was pretty much stating how back in the day, Warner Brothers used to be this great animation studio, bringing in legendary directors such as Tex Avery, Fritz Freleng, Chuck Jones, and Bob Clampett, along with others like Frank Tashlin and Bob McKimson as well. But then he would continue on by saying, this is in contrast to the current strand of thinking in contemporary Hollywood that anyone can direct an animated feature or create an animated TV series. It's an attitude that is completely dismissive of the art form and a fundamental failure to recognize that animation, although sharing many qualities with live-action filmmaking, is a distinct art form. And he even stated somewhere in the beginning, I'm trying to find it right here. Yes, he also stated on top, if Shepard joins the film as director, it would follow the existing Warner Animation Group strategy to stunt cast Hollywood personalities with no animation experience as directors of animated features. The studio's upcoming animated feature, Storks, also includes a co-director with no prior animation directing experience, Nicholas Stoller, who wrote the film's script. So basically, his problem is not necessarily Dax Shepard himself, but it's more the fact of bringing in non-animation directors onto animated projects. That's his problem. It seems like Amity's mindset is that people who should be directing animated features must be people with an animation background. You gotta have, you must work on some animated TV shows or animated movies in order to go and direct an animated film. If you don't come from that background and you're gonna go and direct an animated feature film, you're just gonna screw everything up and you're pretty much gonna go and destroy the entire project entirely, and you're just gonna encourage others to do the same thing. Now, let me just go out and state this, that I honestly believe that the mindset that Amity is bringing here with this article is absolutely wrong. Honestly, this is pretty bad to go and immediately judge that Dax Shepard is going to do something bad with this Scooby-Doo movie because he doesn't have an animation background. The most that Dax Shepard has done is that technically he is among the cast of Robot Chicken, but that is pretty much it. But honestly, it's just way too early to determine if it's actually a good or a bad thing that they would bring in someone like Dax Shepard onto the Scooby-Doo animated feature film. But with that said, the ideology alone, that just stating that bringing in non-animation directors onto animated films is a bad thing, that is a really bad mindset, honestly. Because in the history of filmmaking in general, there have been many times that we've actually seen non-animation directors jump into an animated feature film, and it would actually bring in a really good result. Let me just bring up a few examples. A great one, actually, I just thought one up. It was actually Robert Zemeckis. This guy doesn't necessarily have an animation background. He didn't necessarily work with animation, but he had to be on board to work as the director of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And that movie involved a lot of innovative use of mixing live action with animation. And that turned out to be phenomenal. It turned out to be a legendary animated feature film. And it's hard to find. It's almost. I think the best way to put it is that it is extremely difficult to find anybody, to find any animation fan who is not a fan of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It is a monumental masterpiece in itself. Another great example is, I'm trying to think of another one here. Actually, in 2009, Wes Anderson. That dude doesn't know animation. He had never worked on animation before. Yet, lo and behold, there he is with Fantastic Mr. Fox, introducing to many new audiences to who Wes Anderson is, and is often regarded as one of the greatest stop-motion animated features there is. Phenomenal film. And it really does. And the funny thing is that it actually introduces his style, his filmmaking style onto animation, which actually really does translate well. And even recent examples. Gore Verbinski never did animation, yet he actually did Rango and won an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. Charlie Kaufman came in making Anomalisa, which actually made a lot of Oscar buzz and actually had a lot of people debating which is better, who deserved the Best Animated Feature, who deserved to win Best Animated Feature more, Anomalisa or Inside Out. People were in debate for that, and they were loving that movie. But again, these are all by people who they've never done animation before, yet there they are directing this, and they did a phenomenal work. And actually, here's another great example I just thought up. This is something that I've recently mentioned, Edgar Wright's Shadows. As you guys know, coming soon in 2019, Edgar Wright is going to be directing a film at DreamWorks Animation called Shadows. You didn't hear anybody freaking out or being mad at Edgar Wright that he doesn't come from a background of animation, yet here he is going out there trying to make this animated film. No. Everybody's actually excited for it. Because the thing is, with Edgar Wright, he is actually a very well-acclaimed director. I would even say that he is a very well-acclaimed auteur. This is the guy who directed such films as Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and he was even the director of the Cornetto trilogy. This is the guy who did Shaun of the Dead. He did Hot Fuzz. He did The World's End. And it's not like people got mad at him to come in to do Shadows. Everybody's actually excited because we're going to see an Edgar Wright animated feature. And this mindset of we shouldn't have non-animation directors work on animated feature films. That's pretty much the equivalent of that's the equivalent of saying that we shouldn't bring in animation directors to work on live action films, because recently we have seen many people with a background of animation jumping into live action, coming out with great results. Some examples that I can think of, we got Brad Bird, Phil Lord, and Chris Miller. I would even throw in Tim Burton into it. And just recently, they even announced one of the directors of Sausage Party, Conrad Vernon, who before Sausage Party did absolutely nothing but work on DreamWorks projects and even directed a few as well, including Shrek 2, Monsters vs. Aliens, Madagascar 3, and now he actually got signed in to work on the live-action remake of The Toxic Avenger. And this is not even to mention many of the other ones that announced that they're going to be working on live-action films as well. Jennifer Yu Nelson, Henry Selick, and several others as well. People who used to be in animation, now they're going to be jumping into live action. And also, another one I would even throw in, Seth MacFarlane. Technically not really a director, but this is a man with a large background in animation, and now he's just a prominent entertainer altogether, not just in movies, but also TV shows, music, and everything. This is a massively talented man right there. with all that said, like, I would even apply, like, this is the same kind of mindset saying that people who directed, like, the people who worked on television should not go into movies. That is another example. Like, you could pretty much have that mindset where, because television is such a different format than movies, that people who worked on television can't make a feature film. But there are some times that do bring in some mixed results. Sometimes it does actually work, especially with people like Jorge Gutierrez, when he used to work on TV projects like El Tigre, and then suddenly he came out with The Book of Life, a fantastic film. But then there are some moments that actually don't work, like Genndy Tartakovsky coming into Sony Pictures Animation, and what follows afterwards is just a consecutive series of bad career choices over and over and over and over, most of which are named Hotel Transylvania. Nah, but yeah, the thing is, with the way that Amid Amidi is accusing, like, actually full-on accusing Warner Animation Group entirely of saying that they are doing a bad thing to bring in non-animation directors to do animated projects. Like, honestly, that is pretty bad. It's not, I wouldn't say it's as bad. It's not as extreme as the following examples I'm gonna say, but it's pretty similar to some of the controversies that occurred when people got mad when Ghostbusters announced that they are going to bring in women to be the Ghostbusters, or when Zendaya would be Mary Jane in Spider-Man Homecoming, because like, when people got mad at that because she's not entirely white, but kinda, I don't know, she's more mixed, but that's just a mess altogether. But yeah, like, this is just like, what Amid Amidi is presenting here is just a really bad prejudice. Actually, there's just one thing that I noticed. A buddy of mine, Joey Tedesco, you might know him from Cartoon Palooza. He actually brought up another great idea, another great example of just someone with no animation background coming into animation. He mentioned BoJack Horseman. That's another great example. A highly acclaimed animated feature. Well, not animated feature, a highly acclaimed animated project coming from someone who never worked on animation before, yet here he is with BoJack Horseman, and just absolutely amazing. But yeah, this is just a real, like, this is honestly just a really bad prejudice that he has. And if I may speak as a film critic, now I know for a fact that you can't just have like a specific mindset of how this movie will be, like, oh, this is guaranteed to be good, or this is guaranteed to be bad. You have to be open of what to expect. Now, just because Dax Shepard is going to work on Scooby-Doo doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be a bad project, because he won't know what he's doing. Like, even for me, like, even when it comes to movies that are like sequels to bad movies, rather it be like Ice Age 5 or another Hotel Transylvania movie, I always leave like at least 5% that maybe this could end up being good. And although, like, I do end up being right that, yeah, it does end up sucking, like, it does happen when it does exceed my expectations, that it actually came out a lot better than I could ever imagine. Like, the best example I could think of this is actually Planes, Fire, and Rescue. When that movie was released, honestly, I was expecting it to be terrible, because I remember I had a horrible experience with the first Planes movie. It absolutely sucked. But then, Planes, Fire, and Rescue came in. Not a good movie, but it wasn't bad at the same time. It did exceed my expectations. Like, I came out like, huh, that was a lot better than I expected, you know? It was actually a pleasant surprise that I actually came out not hating that film. So you can't just, just because of one small element doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come out sucking. And the thing is that even though Amid Amidi is freaking out that Dax Shepard is gonna go into Scooby-Doo, they still have Tony Cervone. Like, that guy is an entire veteran of Warner Brothers Animation. This guy was one of the animation directors of Space Jam. So, at the very least, in the animation, in the visual component of that film, I'm sure Tony Cervone is going to take care of that, while Dax Shepard is going to be more focused onto the storyline, like the plot of the Scooby-Doo movie. So at least in that regard, it's going to happen. And I mean, like I said before, this is technically not going to be the first time that it will happen. Like they are going to release Storks, and that actually does have a director with no animation background. Maybe it could be a good result, maybe it won't. Like, so maybe Storks could be a good indicator to see if this would actually be a good idea or if this could be a bad idea. But either way, I think the one important thing to say is that if you're going to judge a movie, if it's going to be good or if it's going to be bad, don't judge it because there's going to be someone who doesn't have a background in animation that's going to be coming in. Judge it by when the movie itself will come out, and then you'll see for yourself. Like, I'm going to save judgment about what, like, the entire Scooby-Doo movie in itself until the movie is going to be released in 2018. So at least there is that. And also, don't be prejudiced in general if a non-animation director is going to come into animation, because sometimes it could actually come out with great results. It could actually come out with movies like Fantastic Mr. Fox, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Anomalisa, Rango, or any of those films. So at least keep your mind open into it, and maybe these non-animation directors would think up of new and inventive ideas that can really help out the medium. Who knows? But yeah, this is just to say, if you're going to judge the Scooby-Doo movie, don't judge it because Dax Shepard is working on it. But anyways, that is all that I've got for this week, so thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Animation Podcast. You can find more of my work at film-book.com, just search for Mathieu Brunet or the Animation Podcast. You can also find me on Twitter at Animat505, and one more thing I would like to add actually is that FilmBook has actually created a Twitter account specifically for the Animation Podcast. You could go check it out at AnimationCast. If you listen to this episode, or if you listen to this podcast on iTunes or any other podcast service, do you mind doing us a little favor and go and rate and review this episode? That would be lovely. And if you are listening to this podcast on YouTube, then go hit that like button on our video and leave us a little comment on your thoughts on the news this week. Tune in next week for the latest episode of the Animation Podcast and all things animation. Thank you guys so much for listening, and until next week, see you later, dudes!